Hello and welcome. Well, one of the most exciting things about having children is celebrating their achievements and the reaching of new milestones in their lives, from taking their first step to saying their first word and losing their first tooth. Now, as they grow from a baby to a toddler, another exciting milestone is moving them to the next stage from a cot to a big bed. But when is the right time, and what tips are there that can help you successfully navigate this transition? Well, to help, we welcome our special guest, our infant and child sleep consultant and expert, Emma Callaghan. Now, Emma is a mother of three and also has a background as a midwife and IVF reproductive nurse specialist. Now, she has over 20 years experience working within both a hospital and community setting, and extensive experience in working with infants and children in their formative years. Thanks so much for joining us, Emma. How are you?
Oh, good, Rachel. Thanks for having me. It's
This
lovely to
is
be here.
Well, yeah, and thank you for your time, because we know you're very busy, and you're a busy mum of three, as we were just saying. And from that perspective, you can bring both, practical and professional knowledge to help the parents watching and listening, to help them find
Absolutely.
a solution that's unique to their child's needs, because every child and every situation is different.
Yeah.
And as we were just saying, this is really an exciting milestone in a child's life, and to see the progress into a big kid's bed. But on the other hand, I guess some parents may feel like they're losing their little baby. So initially, I'd love to know, have you had many experiences with your clients, and even with your own kids, about this notion at all?
Oh, definitely, Rachel. Like I think it is kind of an exciting thing. You know, you've had them in the cot for all this time, and you just kind of want to get on to the next thing sometimes, or you. Often I see like a mum might be pregnant for the second time. So the family are expecting baby number two, and they think, right, now's the time to move our toddler out of the cot,
Yep.
and push them on a little bit earlier than maybe is ideal. So we'll talk about that, but that's a really big thing that I see, that we want to move them on, and I'll explain in a minute why I sort of say just hold on and wait a little bit.
Well, tell us, initially, what are some of the main challenges parents face when transitioning their baby from a cot to a bed then?
Well, I think the main things are that overall people do it too soon. So because of that, they're excited to move them, or they're expecting baby number two, or sometimes it's because the toddler might be beginning toilet training. So they want them to be able to, walk out of their bed and be able to get to the bathroom and toilet, in the night and that sort of thing. But really, I always say, I suggest that parents wait till their toddler is at least 3 years of age. So that's quite a lot older than you would imagine. Then you
Yes.
think a lot of, because even two seems, when you've gone through one and they finally get to two, you think, yeah, great, that'll be good. But the biggest challenge around this is that they just don't have impulse control yet. Their little brains literally are not developed enough to have that impulse control. And what I mean by that is, if we say, okay, now you're in your bed, there's not necessarily even a rail on the bed, or, anything to kind of keep them in. And for the first couple of weeks, they stay there and think it's like their cot, and they don't realize that they can get out of it often. But then they start to jerry onto the fact that they can get out of the bed, and they will just keep coming out. So they just don't. If you say stay in bed all night, that's really hard for a younger toddler. And when they're around three, that's when they do develop this impulse control. They don't have the impulse to jump out. They can listen to what you're saying and follow directions a bit more and stay in bed. And that's probably the biggest thing I see, is parents just moving them too early.
And when you think about, three is a lot older than what the majority of all parents would know and think instinctively for
It
themselves.
is.
And do you generally, with the families that you work with, do they sort of have this same sort of reaction that they're like, three? Really? Like
They
it's,
do.
yeah.
Often they do. And it depends too, I suppose, there's factors like, the reasons why I would move them earlier than that are that, say the toddler is a climber and they're starting to get that little, leg over the top of the cot.
Climber.
And, some some kids are just climbers, so you really want to be safety first. You can't keep them in that cot if it's not safe. So that would be one of the reasons I'd suggest to move them earlier, is if they're climbing out. So the second you can see them getting the leg over the edge, you're going to move them.
Yep.
The other thing is, I really noticed too, Rach, is that all cots are not the same, and our
Yes.
kids are tall. So often, like a toddler standing up in a cot, depending on the brand of the cot, it doesn't really, for tall toddlers, give them much time in the cot. And that's actually one tip that I'd like to sort of tell parents, is to, when you are out buying a cot, like, even you wouldn't even think of this, or I wouldn't have, try and get one that the base can go quite low. And
Yes.
generally there's, how there's generally two positions for the cot. You've got the top one when they're really, really younger, and then you move it lower. Well, that second low point, I find on some cots, still isn't really low enough.
Uh-huh.
So, check out whatever brands you want, but I would really suggest getting something that can go really low. So when they do stand, they're not being able to, tip forward and get as though they're going to fall out of the cot. So that's a really important thing as well.
Great advice.
Yeah,
And,
that's a big tip.
and I think that point's actually in the article, which brings me to my next thing. Like, we published your article, and the title is Moving from the Cot to a Big Bed. So for someone who hasn't yet read the article, can you please tell us what the article's about and just what inspired you to write it?
I think, well, it's about just that, like, when is a good time to move your baby from the toddler, from the cot to the big bed? When is the ideal time? I get
Yes.
asked that all the time. Hey, and when do I do that? What should I be thinking about? When's a good time? And it's just a really kind of basic, common question, but I thought there are some genuine things that it would be helpful to know about it. And I wanted my parents to, understand and know all that kind of stuff. So,
Awesome.
like I said, yeah, the first thing, we go through why it's better to hold off till they're older, this impulse control concept. That I can't remember who did it, but there was that scientific study where they put 3-year-olds in a room and put a lolly in front of them and
I
say,
haven't.
okay,
No.
it's like a psychology study, and they the person that's doing the research goes out of the room and says, now you can either have that one lolly now, but if you wait like 3 minutes and it's still there when I come back, I will give you 2 to eat. So this notion of, if you wait a bit longer, you'll get more. But they found at about 3, most of the children tended to wait so they could get the 2 lollies. But often under 3, they just couldn't wait. They just eat it, even though they knew that they were going to get more if they just waited 3 minutes.
That's fascinating. So I guess, so the ideal time to move your child to a big bed is at the age of 3. Would you say around their 3rd birthday, or is it more of around their 3rd birthday?
Judge around the 3rd birthday, but judge it on your own child. Like, if you've got a child that really can follow instructions pretty well, and you feel like is quite, it's not the little rebel toddler that just wants to rebel against everything you say and will follow instructions, then you could definitely move them a little bit earlier. But in my experience, the younger ones are harder.
What about, as you were just saying about the climbers, what if they are starting to climb out of the cot, and it's before that they're 3, should parents move them immediately so they don't actually sustain a broken bone or anything like that from the fall and hurt themselves?
I do suggest that they move them immediately. So, I've had toddlers as young as 18 months trying to climb out, or even younger sometimes, but 18 months I've definitely seen it quite a few times. So I suggest, okay, it's time to get rid of the cot. You can either take the side off the cot and just leave them in the cot for a little while longer, or you can set them up in a big bed. And often beds, you can get side rails for the bed. So if you're worried about them rolling out of the bed, you can put the side rail on the bed. Or if you're still concerned that they're moving around so much and might still fall out, what I also suggest is maybe just putting the mattress on the floor for 6 months. So if they do roll, they're going to be safer.
Yes.
Yeah,
Great
essentially
advice.
children do like space to sleep. Like they do, if they are getting big for the cot too, even if you have to take the side out and they're a big toddler, they do need space to spread out. So it's probably better to move them to the big bed, but maybe put it on the floor. Uh,
And how about, I guess,
yeah.
when like parents are toilet training their kids as well, and they need to go to the toilet themselves. I mean, any advice there? I guess.
I
What you're
guess
just
once
saying,
again,
to take that
yeah,
side rail down so they can get
yeah.
out.
Yeah. And it depends once again how old they are and how good they are at following instructions and what part of toilet training they're up to. Many just start toilet training in the day and are wearing night nappies still overnight. But some when they're just up to because it's such a variation of when
Of course.
toddlers, get the gist of the toilet training. But some do start a lot earlier and they want to be able to get out of bed at night and go to the toilet and go back. And I think you've got to give them that option too if that's where they're really up to.
Yeah.
Yeah, give that to them as well.
In your experience, then, how do parents know what sort of bed is best for their child? Then, when they are sort of at that age, 3, or whenever they are making that decision, like, how do they know what bed is best?
I don't think the bed as such matters, right? That you'd want something that's not ridiculously high.
Yes.
I always think by the time they've gotten to this stage, for whatever reason, you've decided to move them. So it might be that you've had to move them because they're climbing out, or it's just time to move them. You're
Yep.
thinking, okay, they're old enough now. Let's transition. You're turning into an older toddler. Let's move you into the big bed. One of the biggest things I suggest is get your toddler really invested in the move because
Yep.
it is an exciting time. It is, they're sort of turning into the big kid. And they always are, if you can get them on side with change, some kids love the change. Others don't actually want to move out of their cots because, I
Yes.
mean, they do provide quite a lot of security for a child, this being in their cot. It's been their time, their bedtime place for quite
However
a
long.
long time
Yes.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you sort of get them invested in the move and maybe get them to pick out a doona cover with you or the sheet set or whatever, so that
Oh,
they can pick something they like or take them bed shopping, all that kind of stuff to really get them excited and invested in it. And then when you're sort of doing all of that, you're gently talking about the rules as well. You're saying, okay, this is your bed. And now that you've got a bed, you don't get out of bed at night. You only come out in the morning, that kind of thing. Just gently tell them the rules as well. So
yes. And if
incorporate that as well.
And if buying a new bed, you were mentioning before that for parents to ensure that the bed is low to the ground. And what I've read as well, I'd love to know your thoughts on this, but there's a lot of other experts have also said to make sure that there's no gap between the mattress and the rail and the wall,
Yep.
so the toddler couldn't roll or basically get stuck between
Yes.
the bed. So not to put it against the wall, as they could potentially sort of fall through that gap. I just wanted to know
Yeah.
your thoughts.
Safety, yeah, Rachel, is a massive thing. So that's another thing I always talk about when you are moving them, especially if they've had to be moved younger. You've got to think then the whole bedroom becomes kind of like the cot in terms of you've got
Yeah.
to make it really, really safe. So
Yes.
don't have the bed exactly near the wall. Have make sure the blind pullers and everything are safe and tied up.
That's
Have
a
the
red nose
electrical
thing as well.
outlets
Yep.
covered, all of that kind of just safety stuff. Make sure there's no shelves that they could climb up on and pull themselves down. There's no choking has in the room, batteries lying around or coins or any lids to things that they could put in their mouths. Because
Yes.
one thing I always do notice is when they will work out pretty quickly that they can get out of bed. That's just what happens. And a lot of the younger toddlers, say 18 months, 2 years, they start to play in their room. And you might not realize that they're playing in their room, but they're just playing around and you might think that they're in bed. But if you don't make that environment safe, uh, some nasty accidents can happen. So you've got to be careful with
Very,
that.
very important. And you do provide a great list in the article also, with regards to, I guess, all the safety hazards, to be able to do a bit of a checklist. I wanted to
Absolutely.
ask also, when should parents give their toddler a pillow? Is it sort of during this transition phase? What are your
There's not
thoughts?
really a rush on that, Rachel. I mean, there's a lot of, you speak to a lot of health professionals around this, and a lot of people say there's not really a rush on the pillow. So even when you move them, certainly not in the cot, they don't need a pillow.
Yeah.
And it is technically better for their neck and spine alignment if they don't even hold off on the pillow.
Okay.
But it's natural to want to put the pillow on because it comes with the sheet set and that makes the bed look
Of
more
course.
nice, and
Yeah.
it's part of the new thing. So I would say probably 95% of parents do use a pillow, but just make sure it's a really flat, a slim one. You don't want a
Yes.
really big one for a small child's neck. That's probably if either nothing or quite slim, definitely.
Yes. And do you find that usually makes it a little bit more difficult for children to get to sleep and or to get used to the pillows? Any other advice you've got with regards to that at all?
Not really. I've never really heard parents really say anything or complain about that, or even know with my own children that didn't seem to be a big deal. I think they're
Yep.
just so used to seeing pillows on the adult's bed that they kind of get it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess one thing I would say though is with the transition, if there was a special blanket or comfort toy, obviously you're going to take that over for a while as well. And just especially blankets. So don't, just because you've got the new doona and everything, don't just ditch that special blanket that they had in their cot, because I still like to snuggle with that as well.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah.
And what are your thoughts, I guess, with parents setting a new bedtime routine to help ease that transition as well? Do you have any advice or any thoughts around that, or what do you generally sort of tell parents?
Bedtime routines for each, great if it's the toddler's going to a cot or the bed. I'm definitely into bedtime routines. It doesn't really matter what your bedtime routine is. It's as long as it's consistent. And the whole idea of a bedtime routine to me is that a child knows, okay, first I go in, I brush my teeth, then I go in and mum or dad read me a story, and then or whatever order you want to do it in. There's no right or wrong. I get my pajamas on, I get taken to the toilet, I have my last cuddles, I say goodbye to night to my toys and the dog. Whatever way your family does it. But
Yep.
what that is saying to the child's brain is, okay, this is what comes next. And the final ending of this routine is that I go to bed. It's a predictable sequence of events. It's all leading up to bedtime.
Yes.
And along that way, you're getting quieter and calmer, and often the lights are dim, and it's slowing the brains down of busy toddlers that just need that. It's really hard to go from
Unwinding.
unwinding. It's hard to go from revved up, isn't it, to suddenly you're meant to be calm and go to sleep.
Yes, of
So
course.
I
You got to
would
transition it.
recommend,
Yes.
a good wind down routine really for cot or bed. It doesn't really make a difference. I
Yeah.
would definitely recommend that.
And I meant to ask before also, should parents consider using a bed rail to stop the toddler from falling out of
Yeah,
the bed? And if
yeah.
so, is, you were talking about safety earlier on as well, but it's also sort of ensuring there's no gap again, of course. But I just wanted to ask,
Yes.
what are your thoughts on bed
Well,
rails?
I think that's the tricky thing. Like, you say they're younger. Um, another thing to mention too is they will work out that they can get out of bed, obviously. So there's that part of it. And one of the biggest things, this no impulse control, is they will just come and visit you. Like, you'll put them to bed and you might be out, I don't know, watching television or doing whatever, and they just appear like, hi. Didn't I just put you to bed 30 minutes ago? Then they're like, hi again. They're just curtain calls, I call them. I want water. I want this. I want to go to the toilet again. I want it, or you're asleep in the middle of the night and you just get a little visitor by your bed in the middle of the night. So they just keep coming out. So the rail is more a safety thing. But if you've got a toddler who keeps coming out of the bedroom, you've got to put that physical barrier up for them because they have no impulse control, which was often a baby gate at the door, one of those
Yes.
safety gates at the door. So it sounds, some parents freak out about that and think, oh, you're caging them in, but it's no different to the cot. You've got to think of the bedroom then becomes the cot, and
Yes.
that represents the physical barrier. So obviously you're making everything safe in that environment, but they need that physical barrier. And then, there's certain ways that I help parents teach them to stay in the bed and provide incentives for them to stay in the bed, and, lots of positive reinforcement. Sometimes do role play with their toys about how good their toy was that,
Yeah,
Teddy
it's a
stayed in bed
great
all
idea.
night, and all this kind of stuff, just to help them get it. So, but the bed rail, what you were saying before, is more of a when they are already actually asleep, you don't want them to roll over. So I would recommend starting off with a bed rail. 3-year-olds generally don't need a bed rail though. They're pretty good. They stay in bed pretty well.
And what happens when, for example, you have a new baby on the way and the child, you need the cot, maybe, and also from a space perspective also, and from that perspective, is it best to move your child at least 8 weeks before your due date, to maybe help them get settled in before the baby is born? What are your thoughts about that?
Yes, I would recommend. There's a few ways you can go about it. So
Yeah.
often when a mum's pregnant the second time, they might, many, in my experience, many babies, I reckon 90% start off going into a bassinet. So, not an actual bigger cot, like just a smaller bassinet, cradle, whatever you want to call it. Uh, so they're little, and then they often, by about 4 or 5 months, they're getting a bit big and they're touching the top of the bassinet, so they need to move them out into the cot.
Yep.
So if you're a family that's got a bassinet, you've got to think, well, I'm realistically not going to be moving my baby to the cot till at least another 4 months after they're born. So you could keep your toddler in, you don't need to rush them out of the cot if you're using the bassinet.
Right.
And so don't do that. Uh, Secondly, if you've got a toddler that I even sometimes recommend, if you can borrow someone's cot, like if you just ask around families, many people have, oh yeah, we've got a cot in the garage that you can borrow and don't need anymore or whatever. Use that for a while. If your children were really close together, you wouldn't want to be moving, a 1-year-old or an 18-month-old to the
That's
bed.
the thing.
Get 2 cots for a while. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Don't rush it. But if they're older, and I would prepare them by saying, let's do something exciting for you, and make it this really exciting thing that they're getting the big bed, and frame it in a really positive way. You're getting this because you're turning into a big girl or a big boy, and we're so proud of you, and we know you're up to this. And they love to people please, toddlers. They love to rise to the occasion and inherently really want to please their parents. And we know that you're ready to stay in bed all night, and you pump them all up, and then that's a good time to do it when they're a bit older.
And I'd love to know, just generally, what, in your time and throughout your career, have you seen the biggest mistakes parents make just when, like, sort of going through this transition, and moving them to a big bed? What are the biggest mistakes that you sort of see?
I think, Rach, that's really probably the biggest one that we just touched on then, is moving because the mum's pregnant.
Yep.
That's
And too
a
early.
huge mistake. Just moving them too early
Yep.
is the biggest mistake. And then also not thinking about the fact that because they can get out, well, if you've got a non-compliant toddler, and many are naturally non-compliant, they're meant to be, and they keep coming out, that you might need to think about putting that physical barrier, that gate up. And that's okay. You're not being mean, you're not doing anything wrong, and it might only need to be there for 3 nights or up to a week or something, until they learn that you mean that they have to stay in their room. Because what I start to see is that toddlers that get out of their beds all the time, they become really overtired. Like,
Yes.
they're just missing out on all that sleep overnight, mucking around, coming in out of the room, parent walking them back to bed, they appear another hour later. That's a couple of hours every night of sleep that they're missing out on, and they
Yep.
start to become really, really overtired. And then that overtiredness impacts on daytime naps as well, because you would have heard that saying, sleep begets sleep. So the more sleep that they get, the easier it is for them to sleep. And the more overtired they get, it's sort of a bit of you wouldn't think it, but it's harder for them to sleep because their little bodies are running high on cortisol and adrenaline, and it is actually harder for them to be calm and start to sleep. So
Yep.
I'm all about doing it with this idea in mind, that it's for the best for them, because we want them to have great sleep. We
Of
want them
course.
to get the most sleep. The other thing I really see is early morning waking problems. So they might be pretty good staying in there overnight, but they wake up at 5:30 in the morning, or as soon as that little chink of light comes in the side of the blinds or whatever, that just
Ting.
sets their circadian rhythm to wake up, and they just come into your room. It's like it's not
So,
morning yet, but yeah, they're missing out on a lot of sleep on that end of things.
so blackout
Um,
curtains then, you're suggesting?
Blackout curtains, absolutely. Yeah, if I'm looking at, to me, like the ideal sleep environment, this is good for all the parents to know, is set it up right from the get-go with your little newborn. Make the sleep environment as dark as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Reason being, right, she's like, when we're out in the light, like where I'm sitting now, all the natural light's coming into my eyes, and that builds up serotonin in our brains.
Yep.
Same with our babies and our toddlers, even a little newborn. Like, you know, they're out in the kitchen, you're holding them, or in the family room, or taking them for a little walk outside. All that natural light builds up serotonin in their brains. And when we take them into a really dark space, all that serotonin is converted into melatonin, the sleepy hormone. So that's just a really cool thing that we know that happens. There's been a lot of research done on it in the last 5 years, and the studies are really showing that the darker the sleep space that they sleep in, much higher levels of melatonin are in these babies and toddlers' brains. So there's a really good, you know, scientific reason why we want to make it really dark for their naps.
Yes.
Um, and in
Great idea.
toddlerland, a chink of light coming in the morning really does set them off for, obviously stops that melatonin being produced, but just, yep, it's day, you know, I'll start the day. So you want to be thinking about that, you know, do you really want your toddler appearing, getting out of their bed? You know, that's another reason not to move them too soon, because they'll start to get really overtired from so early in the morning.
Yeah. And getting back to what you're
Yeah.
saying about setting up the room, I just wanted to revisit some of the stuff about safety and the precautions that parents should be following. So you mentioned about child-proofing cupboard locks, considering child safety gates in some areas of the house, maybe outside of the bedroom, also stairs, kitchens, external doors. So just so obviously the toddler can't let themselves out. Removing in other parts of the house other sharp objects, making sure things are high and out of reach. All those electrical appliances, making sure that they're out of reach. Any bracket heavy furniture. You did mention earlier about the chest of drawers, bookshelves, make sure that TVs, if at all possible, are secured to the wall, and or are out of reach where they can't sort of obviously pull them down. Of course, removing any heaters, safety plugs and unused power outlets. Very important is the curtain and blind cords, ensuring that they're all sort of tied up. And that's something that one of our partners, Red Nose, are very big advocates in also.
Totally.
And I even last week actually had someone coming around. We're going to get some new blinds here at home, and the guy was just saying that even when they're installing new blinds these days, they've got to have different sort of from a legal perspective, ensure that the cable is all tied up as well. But that obviously something is critically important. Also, things like medications and cleaning products and chemicals, making sure that they're high and or in a locked cupboard, and other things like this, maybe in their bedroom or in the baby, if you're having another baby or have another baby, you know, things like baby lotions, medications, vaporizer solutions if they're poisonous, and just making sure that anything that's on a change table as well is out of reach for them as well. We've all seen those hilarious memes where kids have just sort of covered themselves in thick pseudo cream and all of that sort of stuff. So.
But it's so true, Rach. You've covered that off really well. That's such a the other thing I find is corners of things. You know how you can get the little protectors for corners of little low coffee tables or tables, or they bang heads on corners really easily.
Yeah. So look, we've covered off a lot, and there's, as we're mentioning, there's a lot covered off in your article. Also, from things to consider, why and reasons you should be moving your child to a bed to bedroom safety, and then of course setting them up in their bed. But I mean, overall, how would you sort of summarize your key messages for anyone watching or listening?
Rachel, I think I mean, this is, we're talking about one real specific issue of, you know, what do I do? What MON's the ideal time, like we said before, and I think it's a great question to be asking because, as you can see, there is an ideal time that's waiting till they're older. The biggest key thing that I see with the mums that I end up working with, a lot of them wait till it's too late to get help. So when I'm talking about, like, with their baby won't sleep, obviously I help with sleep, or their toddler in massive sleep deficit because of reasons like this. And I help with children right up to the age of 5, but my most common 0 to 3 would be sort of, newborn is a different thing, and I do a special newborn package, but babies and up to 3 is my really common age that I work with. Get help sooner rather than later, because often by the time parents call me, I feel like their mums particularly are broken. You know, they're just exhausted. I had a mum last week who said to me, I just feel like I can't even drive at the moment. I'm so tired. I literally can't see properly from getting up 7 or 8 times a night to help her baby get back to sleep. And my message would be, it doesn't have to be that hard. There's help out there. It's really not as hard as you think to change it. And when I help people, I do it really, really gently and step by step, and meet them at their, you know, work with their parenting style. So getting help for your baby's sleep does not have to be this big scary thing that you feel like you can't do. And get help sooner rather than later, I think, would be the biggest message. Don't wait till you're so overtired and the baby's so overtired that they are really, well, they're just not really thriving then anymore because they can't cope with life in general.
And why do you think generally sort of parents sort of leave it a little bit later to sort of get support? What?
Yeah, I think, Rach, it's a good question. A few factors. I think first of all, there's a lot of opinion out there. So often I see there's a mum or a mother-in-law or a sister or a cousin or friends all put in their opinion. This worked for my baby. Try this, try that. And what they're really not seeing is, when I work with babies, I need to know the whole picture. I can't just know one little aspect of it, because that might have worked for their friend's baby, but your baby is a completely different temperament and completely different weight and completely different feeding style and completely different, you know, which we look at all of those things. So I find shutting out all the voices is hard. And then there's that little bit of them, or big bit of the mum, that thinks, I should know how to do this. I should instinctively be able to get this right. You know, have I failed if I'm reaching out for help? Which you haven't at all, not one single bit.
Completely
Because some
opposite,
babies
yes.
are harder than others. They are. Some babies just snooze away, and others do find it a little bit harder. And with some gentle, good tips and some really good follow-up support, you'll learn and understand so much to be able to apply it to your baby. So I think it's a bit of that, right? Family influence, and then this feeling that I should know how to do. The other thing I see is there's a lot of information out there. Like it's all on the internet. There's heaps of books. So often a regular story is, oh, Emma, I've read this book. I've done that. I tried this. I tried that technique, but nothing's working. And really the reason why I find that it's not working is it's very hard to troubleshoot a plan when you've got no one to speak to and go, well, that was meant to happen last night, but didn't happen. So now I don't really know what to do.
Yeah.
That's where sort of having that consolidated support really helps.
Wonderful. Well, look, if parents have got any questions for you and or want to reach out, whereabouts can they find you?
So jump onto my website. I'm www.babysleepexpert.com.au. So, and you can see me, follow me on Instagram at babysleep.expert, and on Facebook at that Baby Sleep Expert. So a few different ones there, but jump on my website. That's the easiest one, and just call me. I'm always just happy to have a chat and, you know, just find out what's going on and give you my take on it and just help you.
This has been an awesome chat. Thank you so much. And I really hope to have a chat with you again in the not too distant future. Take care and stay
Oh,
safe. Thanks,
thank
Emma.
you. Thanks, Rach. Thanks for having me.
All right, you're
Appreciate it.
welcome. Okay, bye.
Bye.